Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Tonight, I would like to discuss an audio recording by a well-known Zimbabwean musician, Thomas Mukanya Mapfumo. I think what he said in this audio is well worth listening to. And his contribution, his track record in the struggle for a just, free society in Zimbabwe is well documented. But I think this audio adds to that contribution. I'll just play snippets of it and give my own commentary on it.
Makadiko vagari vese muZimbabwe. Ini ndinozi Mukanya kana kuti Thomas Mapfumo. Ndati ndikutaurirei story yangu yakaita kuti ndiuye kuno kuAmerica. Chinhu chakandiudza kuno kuAmerica, vana vangu, ndaida kuti vana vangu vapedzese education yavo zvakanaka vari munyika ine runyararo. Saka ndosaka ndakauya kuno. Izvino ndatoo citizen yekuAmerica. Toda kukutaurirai kuti chakandibvisa kumusha uku chii. Munonzwa ichinzi hanzi wikinero aida kunditengera mota nekunditengera imba nekundipa mari. Kwete, hazvisiri izvo zvinhu zvandinoda kwete. Wikinero kana ari munhu wevanhu ngaape mari yake kuvanhu vanoshupika. Inini handisi kushupika kwete. Ini chandiri kuda, ndiri kuda motikari dzangu dzakatorwa. Motikari dzangu dzinoita 5 dzakatorwa nehurumende. Zvakaitika ndezvizvi. Ndakatenga motikari idzi ndichitenga dzaibva kuSouth Africa. Dzaitengeswa nevanhu vaitengesa motikari idzodzi. Saka ndikabhadhara mari yangu ndikatenga motikari idzi. Zvakazoitika sokuti motikari dziya dzatorwa, dzakaendeswa kunopakwa kuTomlinson Depot. Ndokwadzakandopakwa dziri ikoko. Ini handisati ndauya kuno kuAmerica.
I'll just stop there pause there for a minute. He does go on to explain how the cars, the 5 cars, were initially impounded, and then he was told he could come and get it, and then they sold the cars. And all he's saying is he wants those cars back. But I think the most important thing here is, which he goes on to explain at length as well, is how the regime, soon after independence, has persecuted people like him for no other reason other than that he was one of the few people who stood up and said, no, this is not what we fought for. I think Zimbabwe is unique in that regard, that yesterday's liberators have become the country's worst oppressors. And with our rotten luck, the oppressors of the past, at least were competent, they managed the economy well, they were building infrastructure. The new oppressors have proven to be incompetent, breathtakingly incompetent. And so the economy is all but collapsed. Just listen to another snippet of that audio.
Mhuri yangu nokuona zvaiitika vakati kotoita sei kuti tibude muno munyika munomu. takungosonwa nemapurisa nenyaya yedzimotikari idzi, motikari dzatakabvisira mari, 5 cars dzatakabvisira mari. Hongu tazowana mukana wokudzoka kuuya kuno kuAmerica. Takafamba tikauya kuno kuAmerica tikaona pekugara. Mr. Alan Green, murungu akanaka, murungu ane mwoyo wakanaka, akanga asina rusaro raganda, ndiye akandiita kuti ndive muno muAmerica. Zvakanaka zvadaro izvozvo, tagara kuno. Shamwari yangu anonzi Simba Chiromo kana kuti Cuthbert Chiromo akafonerwa nemupurisa. Foni yaibva kuheadquarters dzemapurisa, akanzi Chiromo, uya utore motikari dzaMukanya, dzashayikwa vanhu vakauya pamberi vachiti vakabirwa motokari. Mazvinzwaka. Chiromo akaenda ikoko ndokunoonana nemupurisa, ndokutorana, ndobva vaenda kwakanga kwakapakwa dzimotikari idzi. Vakanodziona motikari dzese dziri 5 dzakapakwa ikoko. Chiromo akati aiwa zvakanaka, ndichauya ndotora motikari idzi next week. Chiromo adzokera agara. Next week yasvika, Chiromo akadzokera ikoko kuya ndokutorana zvakare nemupurisa uya kuti vanoona kuba dziri dzimotikari dziya idzi. Vakasvika vakaona motikari dziya dzisisipo dzese dziri 5. Apa zviri kutaurwa kuti motikari dzakatengeswa nemumwe mupurisa. Mupurisa akachinjwa uyu akaendeswa kuPlumtree. Saka inini handisi kuda motikari dzekutengerwa naChivayo, kwete. Ndiri kuda motikari dzangu dzakatorwa negovernment, vakatengesa motikari dzangu zvisiri pamurawo. Corruption. Ndo motikari dzandiri kuda. Handisi kuda zvokutengerwa imba. Handina kumbogara kugaraji kwauyu kwaanotaura kwaChiyangwa. Chiyangwa anondiziva inini. Ndakambogara kugaraji kwake inini, ndichigara kugaraji kwake kuti ndakanga ndashaya chii. Ndini ndakanga ndiri muridzi weSporting Lions, timu yakanga ichabudirira but yakakanganiswa. Pandakabva kuZimbabwe, timu yakashaya muchengeti kusvika yaparara. Chinzwai mudzo zvakazoitika. Inini, Oliver Mtukudzi naGeorge Shire takapiwa land neCity Council yeHarare. Takapiwa land kumasababu. Ndikatoenda ndikanoratidzwa land iya. Ndikatoiona land iyoyo. Yakanga iri land yakakura kwazvo. Ndikatofungawo kuti ndichavaka ipapa ndopandichivaka musha wangu ndichiita zvese zvanoda kuita. Asi zvakazobuda zichinzi vana George Shire naMtukudzi land yavo vakaiwana. Inini ndakazoburiswa muHerald, ndakutaurwa kunzi Mukanya land yamavapa varoda kuvaka studio ikoko uko. Wozoita majinguzi ekunyomba hurumende. Handina pfungwa dzakadaro, ndinonyomba hurumende kuti zvaita sei. Land yandapiwa iyi iland yandaida kuti ndivake musha wangu, ndivakirewo family yangu pekugara. Asi inzwai zvakazotaurwa. Ndakupiwa mhosva yekuti hanzi land iyoyo ndoda kushandisa kuti ndivake studio, ndiite majinguzi ekunyomba hurumende. Hazvisi izvoka.
I think this is an important issue. The right to own property. In Zimbabwe, this has been at the heart of the armed struggle itself. When these politicians say we fought for the land, after independence, the people still do not own any land. Only the ruling elite, as we learned a few months ago, that Mugabe owns 12 farms, which, if combined, is equal to the land mass of Lesotho. And yet, the ordinary Zimbabwean is not allowed to own not even a few hectares, a few acres. In the rural area, people do not own the land. That's why it has been called communal areas. It's owned communally. Nobody in particular owns anything. This, the whites used to their advantage. It gave them the political power, control over the ordinary people. And after independence, ZANU-PF has done the same thing. We are not going to have a situation where millions of people are not allowed to own anything, particularly the rural people. The one thing the rural people can say they own is land. I don't see why it has taken 44 years and we still refuse to give ownership, even the size of a football field. Where your heart is built, you own that land. Why we can't do that? Beggars belief. If people were given land, if right now all the people in the rural areas were given the ownership of the land on which their houses are built, just say half a square kilometer, I can tell you now that they will have the confidence to build decent homes because they will know they've got the title deeds. No headman or chief will tell them, oh, you must move, and they lose everything. They will have the confidence to plant fruit trees, develop that half a square kilometer of land, fence it properly. This is mine. They can sell the properties that are in it, the development that they will have done in it, and it becomes an asset. They can sell it and go use the money to go and build, buy another piece of land and build on it. But at the present moment, people are not allowed to own any land. We saw soon after the last year's elections, even those few chiefs we had the courage, the headmen, we had the courage to sell pieces of land, government coming back and say, you had no right to sell that land. In some cases, government itself had encouraged it because they wanted the votes. But as soon as the elections were done, all of a sudden everybody was told that they didn't own anything. It is another way of having political control over the people. This game of controlling other people, denying them even the most basic rights, the right to own something, is an outrage. This has got to stop. Right now, there is a lot of development that is taking place in the urban areas. Most of it funded by those in the diaspora. I think there's a very simple explanation for it. Only in the urban centers can you buy a piece of land and have title deeds. You can't do the same thing in the rural areas. And this is why urban centers are being overcrowded. If people had the confidence of going in the rural area and buy 1 square kilometer of land and have title deeds to that piece of land, they will build a decent home there. Why would I want to build my home in the urban centers where I am subjected to council rates, where in some cases the council is not even supplying water, is not collecting the bin? It has just become a way of taxing people. But people are still going there for no other reason other than that is at least one area where you own, you are given title deeds. We must scrap this. Every Zimbabwean should have a right to own property. And the one piece of property that the majority of our people can rightly claim to be their own is a piece of land. This has been allowed to go on for far too long. We really need to have this sorted out once and once for all. Let's go on again and continue listening to this Mukanya.
Mhosa kundipa mhosa yandisina upaone ipapo kuti zvinhu zvakanaka here, hazvisi zvinhu zvakanaka kwete kuvanhu. Hazvisi zvinhu zvakanaka mufunge. Munoona government inoita udingi daka nevanhu vayo. Handina zvandakavakanganisira, ndini ndakavasapota kubvira vachiri musango. Kusvika vadzoka musango ndichivasapota, ndakazoona kuti inga sapoti yangu yandanga ndichipa vanhu ava ndanga ndichipa vanhu vasiri ivo, havasi vanhu vevanhu. Ndopandakatanga kuvasoropodza. Ndatanga kuvasoropodza, vakatanga kundiona seenemy, asi ndaitaura chokwadi. Saka musashamiswe nekugara kwangu kuno kuAmerica. Hakusi kuda kwangu kwete. Tarisai muone utsinye hwese hwandakaitirwa. Ndakadzimara ndikatengesa maproperties angu ese akanga ari kuZimbabwe nekuti ndakanga ndisina mukana wokuti ndidzoke kumwe. Ndaitotsvagwa kwazvo kuonekwa semunhu akaipisisa. But vari kukanganwa kuti ini ndini ndakavaimbira nzvimbo dzese dzehondo, ivo vari musango. Ndikatobatwa nehurumende yaSmith ndichisapota vanhu ava. Nhasi ndaenemy. Munoona zvinoitika izvi, hazvinhu zvakanaka here? Asi zvinhu zvakanaka, inini handimbofa ndakapesaniswa nevanhu. Ndiri munhu wevanhu, ende ndichagara ndiri munhu wevanhu. Zvemari nedzimba dzeichichi handina basa nazvo izvi. Ndine basa neupenyu hwevanhu. Ndinoda kuti vanhu vagarike muZimbabwe. Zimbabwe ivakwe. Ndo nyika yakabudirira. Vana vaona mabasa. Vana vaenda kuzvikoro. Teitawo nyika yakabudirira. Titoona epatiri nhasi uno tikazvifananidza neZambia. Takatiri kuZambia ka. Zambia yato 200 years ahead of us. Vari kuita zvinhu zvinodiwa nevanhu. Ichirema ari kuita zvinhu zvinodiwa nevanhu. Ndoda kubvunzai kuti vava vakauya vachipinda mupawa, pakanga paine mari yaSmith yakanga iripo, yakanga iri mari chaiyo chaiyo, asiri mapepa. Yakaenda kupi mari? Mari yakangotsakatika. Kusvika nhasi taakuita zvemabhondi. takuita zvemazigi zvichifamba sei. Isusu tese takanga tichibhenga mari kumabuilding society. Ndaibhenga mari yakawanda, mari yangu yaibva kumarecords ndaiendesa kubuilding society. Asi yakazongopfuma mangwana kuseni yakunzi mari yadyiwa neinflation. Yadyiwa neinflation. Achadzorera mari ndiani zvayadyiwa neinflation. Mari yese yakanga iripo pamakasvika yakaenda kupi? Yakadyiwa naaniko? 15 billion yakaenda kupi? 3 billion agriculture command, I don't know what it is. Yakaenda kupi? Asi mimi vanhu munoramba mungori mudzimba makanyarara muchiitirwa makuna akadai. Muri magwara.
Well, I think it's got a valid point there. We have had this ZANU-PF regime for the last 44 years. Even when the economy collapsed, we could not hold them to account. Why? Because they're able to rig the elections. And as long as they're able to rig the election and stay in power, they can do what they like. This has been at the heart of Zimbabwe's problem. As long as this regime is able to rig the elections, we will never hold them to account. Mapfumo is absolutely right. We should be asking what happened. People's savings were wiped out by this hyperinflation, particularly the 2000 to 2008 hyperinflation. And now we are seeing the same thing happening again. We will still, at the end of the day, many people project that this egg is bound to fail just like the other currencies have failed. And at the end of the day, we'll still not be able to hold the regime to account. This has been a recurring theme in Zimbabwe politics. Our inability to hold those in government to account. We have got to go back to pre-independence. The primary purpose of the struggle to end white oppression was that we, the blacks, should also have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. The whites denied blacks a meaningful vote. That is what we wanted. And yet, after independence, we have not had a meaningful vote. ZANU-PF has been rigging elections. Even the 1980 elections were meaningless. Because when ZANU-PF came back from the Lancaster House talks, although they had agreed that they will withdraw all their operatives from the field, send them to assembly points to create an environment where they could be free, fair, and credible elections. That did not happen. The ZANU-PF did not withdraw all its operatives. Men were left in the field, and they were telling the villagers that if ZANU-PF does not win the elections, the bush war would continue. Of course, the people voted to end the bush war. And unknown to the people, the minute ZANU-PF got their legs under the table, they started working flat out to create the de facto one-party state that has ruled the country up to this day. Some people have argued that, no, that was just a campaign gimmick, they didn't mean it. But of course, they were quickly silenced. 1983, when the regime launched the infamous Kukurahundi. The primary purpose of Kukurahundi was to force ZANU-PF's main political rival, PF, ZAPU, to give up its party ambition and join up with ZANU-PF. And that happened in 1987, after the death of nearly 20,000 people, mostly ZAPU supporters and leaders. And that cleared the ground for ZANU-PF to impose the de facto one-party state. We cannot deny that the people of Zimbabwe had no meaningful say in last year's election. This Mnangagwa government is illegitimate. SADC, the AU election observers, they themselves confirmed that this election was flawed, illegal. But unfortunately, that's where we are. We are stuck with a regime that is corrupt, incompetent, because we have no say in the governance of the country. Let me just fast forward this again, and then we can listen to it.
44 years muchishupika ende mucharamba muchishupika mukatadza kubuda mudzimba imomo muchiprotesta muchashupika hamusati mashupika muchashupika nekuti muri magwara ime mamwe wacho munenge muchitadzi iwe uya kuno zoita zvauri kutaura izvo handiuye kwakadaro kunyika isina rule of law ndinouya kuzoitei ikoko kunyika isina rule of law, nyika inopondwa vanhu ukangotaura against the government wakupondwa and the government yematsotsi mukamubvunza.
Just wanted to comment quickly on that point. This issue that Thomas Mapfumo must come back to Zimbabwe, I think is an absurd argument. Thomas Mapfumo was one of those Zimbabweans who have consistently fought for justice, freedom, and good governance. Before independence, after independence, it is absurd that some people are saying, well, you should come back to Zimbabwe. Even when he was in America, he still continued his call for an accountable government. Why is it all of a sudden that he was considered a useful political activist when he's in Zimbabwe? The minute he leaves Zimbabwe, although he's saying the same thing, somehow he has lost credibility. It's absurd. It doesn't matter where he's saying it from. The most important thing is he is still fighting. I think there are two groups of people who are calling for this. There are those, of course, the minions of the dictatorship. They want him to come back to Zimbabwe for no other purpose than that when he was in Zimbabwe, they could harass him. And in some cases, many have been permanently silenced, killed. And so him being away, they regret that. They want him back where they can watch him, intimidate him, and so forth. And then there are the others who have made it a virtue that we have been in the trenches. In other words, anybody else who have left the country is not contributing anything towards the good of the country because he's not in the trenches. Being in the trenches has become a virtue. Although in most of those cases, you ask them, what have you been doing? Yes, you've been in the trenches. What have you been doing? They've done precious little, or in some cases, absolutely nothing. I think Zimbabwe is in a serious political situation. We need all hands on the pump. Those who are outside the country, while you were in the country, maybe you were not so active because you feared the CIO. Well, now that you're outside the country, why are you not active? And those who are outside the country, in the diaspora, you will be tempted to say, I'm out of it. But the truth of the matter is, many of us will still have relatives back in Zimbabwe. Are we turning our backs on them? I think we should not be intimidated by these individuals who are putting enormous pressure on those in the diaspora. Either you've got to be back in Zimbabwe or shut up. I think that is totally unacceptable. Your right to contribute to the well-being of Zimbabwe should be exercised wherever you are. And at the present moment, I honestly believe we need everybody's hands on the pump. That will be the contribution that everybody should make. And we have got to get away from this culture, which is actually behind ZANU-PF dictatorship, that we fought the liberation war, and therefore then we have the divine right to dictate what the country should do. That should be totally unacceptable. The right of all, we cannot keep on fighting the liberation war one after another, generation after generation. We want to move on. Let's secure the rights of all the citizens, even those who are yet to be born, who cannot, even if they wanted to, contribute in the fight to end this ZANU-PF dictatorship. We want to end this culture, this cycle of yesterday's liberators becoming today's oppressors. I'll just play the last bit of Thomas Mapfumo's.
Mamunyari, Shinurai, hapana freedom inouya one silver plate. Munotorwa hondo kuti ingava kutaurirai kuti kana muchidawo budai munotora zvombo muye mutirwise. Vaitokutaurirai zvakawanda. Pamusango wayo vaikutaurirai zvakawanda. Kana muchida nyika iyi motonotora zvombo morwa. Saka havasi kutaura zvekutambaiwa. Zvese zvamunosoroita muchitaurirana muchitanza God is in it, God in it. Mwari anobatsira anozvibatsirawo. Mwari anobatsira anozvibatsirawo. Haangobatsira munhu asingazvibatsiri kwete. 6 million Jews dzakaurayiwa nemaGermans. Mwari akanga ari kupi?
I think he is saying something profound, profound in this statement. We've made the mistake of failing to understand what is it that is going to end this ZANU-PF dictatorship. It is, of course, disappointing that although the last 24 years, the people have risked everything to elect the MDC CCC leaders for the primary purpose of implementing the democratic reforms which would end ZANU-PF's dictatorship. It is a pity that even now, 24 years later, many Zimbabweans out there have no clue that that was the primary purpose. That is the primary purpose of the opposition. And so when the MDC failed to implement even one token reform, when they had the golden opportunity to do so, the people failed to register that reality. The fact that they're still failing to register that reality, even now with the benefit of hindsight, is to be deeply regretted. Whether we like it or not, the ordinary Zimbabweans participated in last year's elections because they'd been conned by Nelson Chamisa and company into participating in those flawed elections, even though it was clear that ZANU-PF was rigging those elections. And that participating would only give ZANU-PF legitimacy. And yet, they participated. Democracy requires an electorate that is informed, educated, knowledgeable, and diligent. We can try all we want to build a democratic Zimbabwe, but as long as we have got an ignorant, naive, and gullible electorate, that will never happen. How is it possible that even after 23 years, without even one token reform implemented, the people still believed that CCC would deliver the country, would end this ZANU-PF dictatorship? It's unbelievable. That is being naive. Even when people were warned, these elections, ZANU-PF is rigging these elections, they still went ahead and participated because Chamisa told them that CCC was going to win big, and he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Hashtag God is in it. And people believed it. Zimbabwe is preparing for the 2028 elections. And already Chamisa is gearing for it. Last week, he produced his usual tweet comment, and it is the one that I'm showing at the bottom of the screen there. And he basically said, I know you have questions on when are we going fix the 2023 era. We are not going to wait for 2028. We are fixing the problem right now. Let's be united, love, and help each other. Together, we will conquer. God is in it. God bless you. This is the same kind of idiotic argument that was used in 2018. Then he argued that the alliance had stringent measures to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. People participated in those elections in numbers, only for ZANU-PF to rig the elections and stay in power. And the same thing was argued last year. And now he's preparing to launch his new blue movement to participate in 2028 without even a token reform implemented, on the basis that God is in it. I totally agree with Mukanya. God helps those who help themselves. To keep on pretending that God will do for us what we can do for ourselves is ridiculous. Particularly in this case here, coming up with such idiotic posturing as participating in flawed elections, so flawed that you don't even have a verified voters roll, that you don't even deploy election agencies, even when you have been given the money to do so, and still expect C to win big, is unbelievable. What kind of people would keep on believing such nonsense? Zimbabwe has had 44 years of rigged elections. Enough is enough. We can stop it. We can end this insanity if we stop and think for ourselves. We are not going to stop ZANU-PF holding 2028 elections. Come 2028 elections, they would want to go ahead with those elections. We are not going to stop Chamisa and his colleagues participating in these flawed elections. They know that ZANU-PF is giving away a few gravy train seats, and they find that bait irresistible. What we can do is stop being so naive and gullible that we are conned into participating in these elections. On the one hand, with the ZANU-PF supporters, because they bought you a piece of chicken and chips, at least those lower down. Those much more senior, the judges, you get $400,000 housing loan, which everybody knows is a bribe. And as for the opposition, we participate because we've been assured that God is in it. God is not in a harebrained scheme where you participate in elections that are so flawed that you yourself can see that ZANU-PF is bound to win this election. It's impossible for ZANU-PF to lose these elections when they've got carte blanche powers to rig. And you know that if you participate, you give the process legitimacy. So why are you participating? We need to come to our senses. That is the bottom line. And I would like to thank people like Thomas Mapfumo. I think most people do not appreciate the sacrifice that he has made and he continues to make for the good of all Zimbabweans. I salute him. And I hope that he's not going to be discouraged by those clamoring that he should come back to Zimbabwe. He is doing a good job where he is. It is not where you are that matters. It's what you are doing wherever you are. And I think Thomas Mapfumo is one of the few who have been in the trenches, if you want. And they've been fighting a good fight. Thank you very much, Thomas Mapfumo. And for the listeners today, thank you very much for your company. Have a good day.